Here we go with the fifth and final round of the Rochester Championship 6-player round robin, 60-minute time control plus 30-second bonus every move. I have the black pieces against the other master in the field, Master Thompson. I knew this was going to be a tough game, and let's dive right into it. I am half a point ahead of Master Thompson, and he's half a point ahead of third place. So if I draw or win this game, it's clear first. Caro-Kann, and we go into the exchange variation. I've seen Master Thompson play c4 in the past, the Panov-Botvinnik attack. But he instead plays bishop to d3. This is just the exchange variation. And this comes right out of the ChessGoals Caro-Kann course. So I have a whole course on this. There's a link in the description. Feel free to check that out. And our move in the course is queen to c7. And the idea is we don't allow an easy bishop to f4. And we want to make it hard for this bishop to find a good square. It doesn't really want to go to e3, boxed in by those pawns. And it doesn't really want to go to g5 either because it's just floating out there in space, not attacking anything. He plays knight e2. It's the most common move, bishop g4. And now here I'm used to seeing bishop to f4 and the response is pawn to e5. Instead he plays f3. I'm sorry, this is the correct move order, f3, bishop back. And now I'm used to seeing bishop to f4, which is met by e5. But instead he castles. So I stick with the plan, e5, rook e1. And at this moment, I make a mistake already. I queenside castle. Something about his move order with not having the bishop out threw me off here. And if you watch the round 4 recap, that game went so long that I only had a 15-minute break leading into this round. So we had a 4-hour game in the first round of this day, and then a 15-minute break. I was rushing to finish this game and playing for the draw is what I thought. So here I was thinking, don't get crushed out of the opening. Don't fall for some sort of tactic if you play knight f6 too early or bishop to d6 too early. But those are the correct moves in the position. Okay, so you can still play knight f6. You can play bishop d6. It's perfectly fine. Instead, I queenside castle. This was a terrible decision. And immediately he plays knight to a3. Looking at this knight to b5 move, attacking my queen, attacking the pawn on a7, all of a sudden I started to think, oh no, I might be in some trouble here, and we're only 10 moves in. I may lose this game, even though it's the biggest prize fund of my life. So then I thought, okay, calm down, Matt. Yes, you had a long game. Yes, it was stressful. You're a little bit tense. But you got a fresh game here, and you have to figure things out. So this is where I kind of started to calm down a little bit and thought, okay, well, how can I play this in the most practical way? Play solid, keep some drawing chances, but also look to play aggressively too. You know, if I can play for the initiative, I'm going to grab that chance because it's much easier to be the attacker than the one playing defense. Here I take a3. This allows white to have the bishop pair. And I think part of the reason I play this is because in the last game, I had this pawn structure almost in reverse. I was the one that had the weak double A pawns and this pawn that was backward on c3. So that kind of weighed in a little bit to this decision, thinking, okay, well, let me give white a structural weakness. So maybe in the endgame that will come into play. Now all I need to think about is, how do I hold off this kingside attack? Or I should say an attack against my king. So here I play pawn to f6, creating this big solid center and putting the question on white. How do you continue your attack? He goes bishop to e3, pointing at this pawn, knight e7. Now all my minor pieces are out. Queen c2, g5. So you might be thinking, how is g5 playing for the draw? Sometimes you have to put pressure on your opponent to encourage them to make mistakes. And that's why I went g5 here. I'm trying to encourage Master Thompson to make a mistake. So now d takes e5 was played. And this is where the tactics start to get a little bit crazy. If I take with pawn, bishop takes this pawn. If I take with knight, bishop takes a7. Okay, so you might be wondering, why play g5 if you know you're losing a pawn? I calculated these lines, and I felt that after knight takes, if he takes on a7, I like this idea of pawn to g4. And he does grab a7 in the game. I play g4, and this move surprised him a little bit. He was kind of taken aback, trying to figure out, well, how do I deal with this counterplay that black is getting against my own king? Because this attack is coming pretty quickly if white's not careful. So he plays f4. Now the downside of f4 is this is starting to lock things up. These pawns are on dark squares. If this pawn ends up here, all of these white pawns are on dark squares, and white has a dark square bishop. So let me remove white's good bishop. So there goes the bishop pair and white's good bishop at the cost of one pawn. But white still has the doubled isolated A pawns and one less attacker now. There's no bishop on d3 to help with the attack. So now I'm thinking, okay, let's try to really kill this white attack against my king. And let's go for the queen trade right here. So I throw in queen to c4. And this is a big decision because if the white queen retreats, then it starts to feel like I'm playing more actively. This bishop may head into e4. This knight may head to f5. Maybe I chuck the g pawn just to open up this g file. White really doesn't want to retreat the queen here, so he takes. But this actually relieves all of white's attack against my king. This is a mistake by white. So the takeaway here, if you're trying to get your opponent to make a mistake, pose them with tough questions like this. In the game, I did feel like retreating the queen was the way to go. I felt the queen trade gave white an advantage, but not that big of an advantage. So that's what ended up happening. He made the wrong choice here, fortunately for me. And now white has only a 0.3 advantage. The one extra pawn is not coming into play yet. Bishop to d4 played, hitting this pawn. Knight to d5. Guarding the pawn and posting up the knight in the center. Knight g3. And I wasn't really sure which way he was going with the knight. I assumed knight to e4 because it double attacks this pawn, maybe threatens knight to d6 check. What I did is I put the rook on f8 to guard this pawn, thinking, okay, I'll try to move my king up next. Maybe I can play f5 because now the bishop is not lined up with my rook. And I can try to lock down this position. I know the draw is good enough and it's affecting my play, but I want to play solid here and not create any winning chances for white, or minimize those winning chances, I should say. Knight h5 played, attacking this pawn. Rook to f7, rook a to d1. Now bishop to f5. So what I'm doing here is I put the rook on f7 to help defend the g7 square. Right, so the rooks are more flexible now. Like maybe one rook comes on the 8th rank, e8, one rook goes to e7. They work together when they're on opposite ranks. And then when I brought the bishop here, what I want to do is put the bishop on d3, plug up this d file defended by the pawn. Knight goes back, bishop c2, just inserting a move to kind of make those rooks awkward, and then bishop to d3. So here there's only one white rook on the e-file, but I'm ready to bring my king up and challenge the e-file. And currently there's no weaknesses that I can't defend. So this pawn is overprotected currently. None of the other pawns are attacked. Rook to f2, needed to defend against the knight takes f4 threat. King c7, knight f1. And here I had a big think. And I was pretty happy with this calculation. I've been trying to work on my calculation, but in the previous games, I still made calculation errors. But what I was thinking here is, can I get away with taking the knight and offering a swap of rooks? So picture this bishop gone, this knight gone, all of the rooks gone. In that endgame bishop against knight, so these two remaining minor pieces, can my knight hold against the bishop? And the answer is yes. If this pawn ends up on a light square, all of my pawns are on light. His bishop cannot attack them. My knight can do a good job switching colors. And my king should be able to march up to the center if needed and help control important squares. So I knew that was probably holding a draw. I felt very confident in that. And then I started to think, could I actually try to trade rooks and sacrifice this f-pawn? Can I get away with a pawn sacrifice and still hold the draw? And I'd calculated that it works. So I went for this. Bishop takes f1, king takes. It looks weird. White's going to double on the e-file and gain this quick control. Position looks slightly shaky for me. You know, this knight's here, this pawn is here. Maybe white can start to attack these pieces. I don't have that bishop on d3 anymore. If I play rook to the 7th, my idea is, I know rook f to e2 is coming. I'm going to offer up a trade of all of the rooks, recapture with the knight, and take f6. So I'd calculated this before I took on f1 because this is the critical line. The critical line is king takes and white doubling the rooks. I need to make sure that I have a defense against this. So here he plays g3. That guards the pawn, prepares the rooks to double. Rook e7, and he doubles. So here I take, and rook e7. So now the question for white is kind of like the queen trade question. Do you trade rooks, or do you avoid the rook trade? And I think if white wants to win this game, you have to avoid the rook trade. But it's a very tough decision to make, because then you give up control of the only open file to the black rook. So here he takes. And it is still a draw with best play if that rook moves away. Like let's say rook to b2. My king can still march up. I'm trying to play b5. Still should be draw territory. But he takes and then grabs the pawn. At this point, I play knight to f5. So here's what I'm doing. This pawn guards f3. This knight guards e3. This pawn guards d3. This pawn guards b3. This pawn guards h3. There's a white pawn here, and a white pawn here. There's a wall on the third rank. How does the white king make progress? There's only one way for that white king to try to make progress, and that's to march all the way over here to the queen side, push the a pawn up, and then come out through a3 and b4. That's the one way for the white king to make progress. Okay, so can I stop that king from making progress? This is something that, when people say chess players become good players because they can calculate 10 moves deep, I always say, no, that's not true. Chess players become good because they build really strong intuition for the most part. Like, think of Magnus Carlsen. He can play extremely strong chess with a minute or less on the clock for the full game, right? So a lot of chess is just pattern recognition and intuition. This is one of the cases where the calculation comes into play. You want to be able to calculate this out till the end and make sure you're never losing if you sacrifice this f6 pawn like I did. You want to make sure this position always holds. And you're able to calculate that out back on move 26. 6 moves ago, you can get to this point and go even deeper and see, okay, this king marches up to the middle, and it's too slow for this king to come all the way over this way because I can march this way, take the pawn, and promote a queen, or promote this pawn as a queen. As long as this knight stays parked here and the pawn here, there's no way for that bishop to get back and help without my king capturing it. So you can actually calculate not only those 6 moves, but maybe another 10 moves. And if you want to do it as a test, go back in the video, go back to move 26, calculate all the way out to this position, and then see if you can see even further with the white king trying to come around and the black king going to the center. That's essentially what happens. I march my king up to the middle, and Master Thompson knows, he calculates it too, of course. This is too slow, and it's actually losing for white because I will come this way, grab the pawns, and promote quicker than white can promote any of these queenside pawns. And one key here is to keep this pawn all the way back on b7, because when that pawn's all the way back, it takes that much longer for the king to come help out. If that pawn would have been further up, it could be a potential liability for me. It could allow white to queen more quickly. So we play a couple more moves. Draw agreed. And I was pretty happy with this game overall. I think the queenside castling was a mistake. But after that, I felt that I played fairly well in terms of trying to limit the amount of the attack that white had. But just going back to this moment, instead of queenside castle, here we can play bishop to d6. And there's not a great move for white that punishes it, let's say. If d takes e, knight takes e, this is kind of what I was afraid of. Could f4 be played? But there's knight takes d3, and after queen takes, knight e7, and black gets castled next. So bishop to d6 was good there. Knight to f6 is also a good move, because I noticed after bishop d6, maybe knight a3 could be played, but this is a good way to play it too, knight to f6. So those are the takeaways, queenside castling. Hope you guys enjoyed these 5 recaps. Rochester Championship 2022, clear first place. Awesome event. I want to thank Dennis Mays, who ran the tournament, and the Rochester Chess Club, and all of the volunteers that helped out. It's just really cool to have an event like this in your hometown.